Hey there, welcome to The Motivated Founder. Today we're diving into something that affects every entrepreneur, why we so often fail to reach our goals despite our best intentions. Have you ever set an ambitious business goal, created a detailed plan and still come up short? You're not alone. The truth is, most of us are sabotaging our goals before we even start working toward them, and it has everything to do with how our minds work. In this video, we're going to explore the fascinating psychology behind goal-setting failure, drawing on Nobel Prize-winning economist Daniel Kahneman's groundbreaking work, and more importantly, how you can overcome these mental traps to finally achieve what you set out to do. Let's start with something fundamental about how our brains work. In his book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman explains that we have two different systems of thinking. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and emotional. It makes snap judgments without much effort. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. It requires concentration and careful analysis. Here's the problem for entrepreneurs. When we set goals, we need System 2 for careful planning and realistic assessment. But our brains naturally default to System 1, which jumps to conclusions and paints overly optimistic pictures of the future. Think about the last time you planned a project timeline. Did you consider all the potential obstacles? Or did you imagine everything going smoothly? That's System 1 hijacking your planning process, and it happens to even the most experienced entrepreneurs. This brings us to what Kahneman calls the planning fallacy, a cognitive bias that might be the single biggest killer of entrepreneurial goals. The planning fallacy is our tendency to drastically underestimate how long tasks will take and how much they'll cost, even when we have past experience that should tell us otherwise. Kahneman cites a fascinating example. In 2002, American kitchen remodeling projects were expected on average to cost about $18,600, but they actually cost nearly $39,000. That's more than double the estimate. This isn't just about home renovation. The planning fallacy affects entrepreneurs at every level. We underestimate how long product development will take. We overestimate how quickly we'll acquire customers. We don't budget enough for marketing expenses. We assume funding will come through faster than it actually does. The fascinating thing is that even when we know about this bias, we still fall for it. That's because it's not a logical error, it's a psychological one. The planning fallacy stems from what Kahneman calls the optimistic bias, which he describes as possibly the most significant of all cognitive biases. Kahneman writes that we have a pervasive optimistic bias, a tendency to view the world as more benign than it really is, and to overestimate our abilities and control. As entrepreneurs, optimism is part of our DNA. It's what gives us the courage to start ventures when others see only risk. But this same optimism can set us up for failure when setting goals. Think about it. How many times have you heard a founder say their startup will be profitable in 6 months? Or that their app will have 1 million users in the first year? The research shows that entrepreneurs are, on average, more optimistic than the general population. That's both our superpower and our kryptonite. The optimistic bias creates an illusion of control. We believe we have substantial control over outcomes that are actually determined by factors beyond our influence, like market conditions, competitor actions, or just plain luck. Kahneman introduces another concept that's crucial for entrepreneurs to understand: WYSIATI, or what you see is all there is. This principle explains why we tend to build our plans based only on what we know, completely ignoring what we don't know. Our brains create a coherent story based on limited information, and we forget how limited that information actually is. When setting goals, WYSIATI leads us to consider known challenges, but completely miss unknown ones, which are often more significant. Think about a typical business plan. We account for known competitors, but not the new startup that might launch next month. We plan for known costs, but not unexpected expenses. We anticipate known market challenges, but not unforeseen shifts. Our brains are naturally averse to uncertainty, so we create an artificial sense of certainty by pretending that what we see is all there is. This is why so many entrepreneurs are blindsided by developments they never saw coming. So now that we understand these psychological barriers to effective goal setting, how do we overcome them? Here are 5 evidence-based strategies. First, use reference class forecasting. Kahneman recommends what he calls reference class forecasting, looking at how similar projects have fared in the past. Instead of building your timeline from the ground up, which invites optimism bias, start with data from similar ventures. How long did it actually take other startups in your industry to reach profitability? How much did their customer acquisition really cost? For example, if the average SaaS startup takes 24 months to become profitable, use that as your baseline, not the exceptional cases that did it in 6 months. Second, perform a pre-mortem. One of Kahneman's most powerful suggestions is the pre-mortem. Here's how it works. Before starting a project, imagine that it's 1 year in the future, and your project has failed miserably. Then work backward to determine what could have led to this failure. This mental exercise helps bypass optimism by explicitly inviting you to look for potential problems. It activates your System 2 thinking and breaks through the WYSIATI limitation. For your business goals, try this. Imagine it's December and we've completely missed our annual revenue target. What happened? Third, use the outside view. We tend to take the inside view when planning, focusing on our specific circumstances and why we'll succeed. Kahneman suggests taking the outside view instead, looking at statistical patterns and base rates. If 80% of startups in your industry fail within 3 years, acknowledging this statistic gives you a more realistic foundation for goal setting than focusing on why you're different. This doesn't mean being pessimistic, it means being calibrated to reality. Fourth, add a specific buffer. Research shows that a good rule of thumb is to take your initial time estimate and multiply it by 1.5 for familiar tasks, and by 2 or even 3 for unfamiliar ones. So if you think your product development will take 4 months, plan for 6 to 12 months instead. This isn't about lowering your ambition, it's about setting realistic parameters that account for the planning fallacy. Finally, build implementation intentions. Psychology research by Peter Gallwitzer shows that implementation intentions, specific if-then plans, dramatically increase goal achievement. Instead of just setting a goal like acquire 100 new customers this quarter, create specific implementation intentions. If a potential client hesitates about price, then I will emphasize our ROI data. If we don't hit our weekly target, then I will increase our ad spend by 20%. These contingency plans activate your System 2 thinking and prepare you for obstacles before they arise. Understanding the psychology behind goal failure doesn't mean lowering your ambitions. It means setting smarter goals that you can actually achieve. By recognizing biases like the planning fallacy and optimism bias, and by implementing strategies like reference class forecasting and pre-mortems, you can set goals that are both ambitious and realistic. Remember, entrepreneurship isn't just about dreaming big, it's about executing effectively. And that starts with understanding the psychology behind how we set and pursue goals. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button and join the motivated founder community. Next week we'll be diving into decision-making biases that affect your business strategy. Until then, keep building, and remember, understanding your mind is the first step to achieving your dreams. Visual outro card with channel info.